When the Lamb takes the scroll, what happens? Everyone praises him, and so they respond in the same way that they responded to the one on the throne. Right? They fall down before him. The worthiness that the Lamb has to open the scroll leads to worship. And noting that the Lamb is worshipped, John is telling us again something very important. Because especially towards the end of the book, John will receive a message from an angel, and he will attempt to worship that angel only to be told by that angel, do not worship me, worship God. Yet the Lamb does not prohibit worship. What does that tell us? He is God, right? As he is worthy to reveal, he is worthy to be worshipped. The 24 elders, as they worship him, are described as having harps and golden bowls full of incense. Now again, don't push this too far, because you can't really play a harp if you're holding a bowl in your other hand. It can't happen. But these are images. Images of what? Well, we're told what the golden bowls full of incense represent. What are the golden bowls full of incense? Right? The prayers of the saints. In Psalm 141 and verse 2, the psalmist says something similar. He says there, "Let my prayer be counted as incense before you, and the lifting up of my hands as an evening sacrifice." Psalm 141 and verse 2. Oh, I had it on the next slide, sorry. And so let my prayers be counted as incense. So, how is prayer like incense? What was the function of incense for the Jews? All right, it has this idea of pleasing God. Sweet smell, kind of pleasing scent. Where was incense primarily used? In the temple. Now, really stretch it. Where was the altar of incense located in the temple or the tabernacle? It was in the holy place. But where in the holy place? Yeah, what was that? Right, it was right before the curtain that separated the holy place and the most holy place. And so the incense would be offered and then go into the most holy place. And especially when the high priest would prepare to go into the most holy place once a year, he was to offer incense. And so prayer is like incense in the sense of it being offered to God, and being pleasing to God, all those kind of things, just like incense was used in the temple. With the same kind of thing, the incense being thought of is going into the most holy place. John's kind of saying our prayers get to God. Our worship on earth is connected to worship and events in heaven. But these prayers of the saints that he's specifically talking about are probably specific prayers for deliverance. Right? Those first century Christians in Asia, especially, experiencing that persecution. And we'll see more of that in chapter 6 when we start seeing the opening of the seals. So, prayers are offered, and the 24 elders sing a new song. And the victory, the conquering of the Lamb, incites a new song, in contrast to the songs that we saw in chapter 4. Right? There's something distinct, something new here. Chapter 4 had just praised the one seated on the throne, but now the Lamb is praised as well. There are 6 times in the book of Psalms where the psalmist talks about singing a new song. in most cases, they usually have to do with victory or deliverance, right? There's been some sort of victory or deliverance, and that has led the psalmist to sing a new song, which of course fits right into what is going on here in chapter 5. Right? He has ransomed people for God. And so the harp connected with worship and song, prayer symbolized as incense, also suggests the worthiness, the worship that the Lamb is due. And so the Lamb is worthy. Right? Worthy especially, of course, to take the book, to take the scroll. What has led to the Lamb being worthy? All right, so the first thing they say is that the Lamb is worthy because he was slaughtered. This is the way the Lamb overcame. This is the way the Lamb conquered, through his crucifixion. Kind of, again, furthering this, God doesn't do what we expect. Because we hear lion, we see lamb. We hear power, we see sacrifice. Through the slaughtering of the Lamb, it has made the Lamb worthy. Additionally, the Lamb is worthy because by his blood, probably thinking about the blood of the Passover lamb, put on the doorpost, and also, of course, chapter 1, verse 5, he freed us by his blood, but by his blood, the Lamb ransomed for God. What does it mean to ransom something?
Well, to get something in return.
Yeah, you putting up money to get something in return, to purchase, buy back. This is another reason why the Lamb is holy, because he is ransomed, he's purchased. The word could also suggest the idea of a prisoner of war being freed. Right? And so money's been given for a prisoner of war to be freed. And perhaps that's what's being suggested here as well. Who has been ransomed? Okay, but specifically, you ransom for God. Verse 9. But right before that, or maybe right after, depends on your translation. Who's coming from every tribe, nation, and all right, maybe you guys don't have the right translation. Somebody read verse 9 for us.
And they sing a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood, men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation."
Does everybody have men? What do you have instead?
Out of every tribe.
Wow. Okay. It's actually saints. Yeah. It's saints. All right? Separated people, holy people. But they are people that have come from a long way to get there, but from every tribe and language and people and nation. Now, certainly not everyone has been purchased for God, but the purchasing is not just of a specific ethnic group, race, or nation. People from everywhere. The saints come from all nations and people. This phrase, from every tribe and language and people and nation, appears several times throughout. And we've seen it already, but it appears several times throughout the book of Revelation. Would you care to guess how many times it appeared? 7 times throughout the book of Revelation, this phrase, from every tribe and language and people and nation. Often the words are kind of switched around. Sometimes it's from every language and tribe and people and nation. But throughout this is the suggestion. Right? God is bringing everybody to him. People, it doesn't matter about your tribe, your language, your people, or your nation. And these people that have been ransomed from all these places have been made to be a kingdom and priests. And we've seen this language. We've We've seen images that reflect this as well. And they will reign on earth. Wait, what? They will reign on earth. What does that mean? Well, there are some manuscript differences. Some have the future, they will reign. Others have the present, they are reigning. Will the saints reign on earth in the future? A lot of that will depend on your interpretation of Revelation chapter 20, which we'll get to eventually. But we can also say they are already a kingdom and priests. So in a sense, the saints are reigning as part of God's kingdom, but also have perhaps a not yet reigning aspect to it as well. With everything else being figurative, or symbolic, I shouldn't say figurative, symbolic, perhaps this, of course, isn't that the saints will be in kingships, governorships, presidencies, but as the sense of who are God's rulers. Well, God's rulers on earth are the people that act just as God would rule if God were on earth. Right? So it's probably a symbolic nature of that. And so the 24 elders have offered their praise, and then John looks. Right? So here we have the fourth time we've looked or saw. And what happens in verse 11? When John looks in verse 11, what happens?
Angels, living creatures, and elders started saying.
All right, so it's kind of like there's these ever-broadening circles of praise. Right? It starts with the 24 elders, but now it extends to this large group of angels. Right? I heard the voice of many angels giving praise, in addition to the living creatures and the elders. The number of them is myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, or you might have some translation that's slightly different. Also, coming from Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. So Daniel chapter 7, very important background text here. What's the number of all of this? Well, if you kind of calculated it out, myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands is 100 million plus a million. So 101 million. Are there literally 101 million angels? Is that what John is communicating to us here? There might be, but what might this number actually suggest? Instead of telling us exactly what the count is, right? Kind of this infinite praise almost, right? It's just so many people offering and beings offering God and the Lamb praise. But they're doing it, now think about this, 101 million angels. And they are singing, but they are singing with full voice. Do you know how loud it's just gotten in heaven? Right? I mean, think about that. I want to say noise, the sound, the volume, singing with full voice, singing as loud as they could. And what they have to say is, worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Specifically, in this case, we've been looking at why the Lamb is worthy. Right? He was slaughtered, he ransomed. But the Lamb is worthy in this case to receive some things. And again, a lot of this will depend on your translation. The words might be slightly different. But the Lamb is to receive power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor, glory, and blessing. Learn those 7. There will be a question on the exam. All right. You can learn these 7 or the 7 in your specific translation, but learn those 7. Because there is 7, right? It's one of those hidden 7s. You don't think about it, but there it is, this 7-fold praise. The Lamb is worthy to receive power. The Lamb is worthy to receive wealth. The Lamb is worthy to receive wisdom and might, but also honor, glory, and blessing. So the praise starts with the 24 elders. It blossoms to angelic company, and then it blossoms one more time to every creature. The praise gets even louder. All of creation is participating in this. Every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, and all that is in them. Again, obviously symbolic. We'll, in just a couple chapters, encounter some people that certainly wouldn't be praising the Lamb. But the symbolic nature of the Lamb's, the worthiness of the Lamb. But also, now we come full circle again, because the praise now comes back to the one seated on the throne. And so the one seated on the throne and the Lamb, praise is due to both God the Father and Jesus. And so this loud praise, building and building and building and building, and then suddenly the 4 living creatures say, Amen. I just kind of imagine just some silence. And the 24 elders kind of prostrating themselves in worship. Right? Just kind of an amazing thing. I forgot the one seated on the throne of the Lamb, blessing, honor, and glory and might forever and ever. It's just, the picturesque nature of these 2 chapters. Yeah, to think that it was so much greater what John saw than what he's able to get into words here. But again, these are symbols, right? So if we were able to see exactly into heaven at this point, are there 4 living creatures around the throne? Are there 7 torches? Right? Maybe not. These are symbols. Right? But what we're presenting, of course, is what it's like where God dwells. And what God is preparing to do. And so quite appropriate in thinking about, as we move into chapter 6 and onward, about God now has a judgment of the people persecuting his people. It's right to kind of start with this vision of God, who God is, where God sits. Jesus encapsulated that as well. Right? And so we're presented with this magnificent experience of God. God's power, God's judgment, God's justice. Which is what those first century Christians want. They certainly know God loves him. That's been said at the beginning. But they're wanting God to be concerned about what they are experiencing. And we're starting off with this picture of a God who sits on the throne, who's in control, who has a message for the people that the Lamb is about to reveal.